March 16th, the chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, said that a recession is unlikely despite the fact that the Fed has raised the rates and cut off the life support to the economy. A few months later, on June 22nd, Powell said a recession is a possibility, but not likely. I wonder what has changed. GDP growth rates for Q2 are out, and real growth decreased an annual rate of 0.6% in the second quarter of 2022, following a decrease of 1.6% in the first quarter, which means technically we are in a recession. But Jay Powell said that he does not think we are in a recession currently. Seems like he has his own interpretation of a recession. That is probably what happens when you fail at your job. However, a month later, on 30th of August, he said that some pain is on the horizon. I wonder what that means. The economy is declining, the stock market is crushed, and companies are going bankrupt. But Jay Powell keeps avoiding the word recession. He's willing to call it however you want, but not a recession. Let me tell you what some pain means. It means putting people out of work, shutting down small businesses because the cost of money goes up, because the interest rates go up. Companies can no longer borrow money to sustain the growth they had the last 2 years. Some people find it difficult to understand that money isn't going to solve all of your problems. If a business is unprofitable, it can survive if you keep feeding it cash, but it doesn't matter how long you keep feeding it. If it's not going to become profitable, it will collapse the moment the financial support dries up. Have you ever been to Subway? Usually there are 3 to 4 people working at a Subway store. If we double the number of workers there, they're not going to produce double the number of Subways. Their productivity will most likely diminish since they will disturb each other, since the place is too small for 8 people to work productively. That's known as the law of diminishing returns, when any additional input will cause a negative output. But at the end of the day, you have to pay them all, at least the minimum wage. That's not a problem when you have access to free money, but when that free money is no longer available, you start running into a trouble. You have to cut your workforce and try to be as efficient as possible with just 3 employees at every Subway store. That's why we have news such as this. Bed Bath & Beyond are slashing more than 20% of their stores. PayPal began firing employees since May. Coinbase will lay off 18% of its employees. Tesla already began laying off 10% of its workforce, with ex-employees confirming that on LinkedIn that they have been laid off. While the Fed is trying to calm us down that everything is okay and we should not worry, the reality is far from that, especially if you ask Ray Dalio, who believes that the United States is on the brink of a catastrophe. Why United States debt crisis will lead the country into a crisis the world hasn't seen before. Why it won't just crush the market, but might cause the US economy to collapse. How high does the Fed has to raise the rates to finally bring inflation down? And how to prepare for the biggest crash in American history. We will answer all of these questions and many more. But before we do that, give this video a thumbs up and let's dive in. Before investing my money in any company, I spend a lot of time researching the company. I try to find everything that's relevant. What's their strategy? How are they planning to grow? How strong are their financial statements? And that takes hours, if not days. Wouldn't it be great if there was an app that would speed up the process and summarize 8 hours of research to just 10 minutes? That's exactly where Finimize comes into the picture. Finimize is an app that helps you become a smarter investor in 10 minutes per day, delivering all the insights and tools you need to make smarter financial decisions. Factors such as interest rates or inflation greatly impact stock prices. So the question that many have been wondering lately is, has US inflation finally truly peaked? One of the factors that led to the highest inflation in 4 decades was high energy prices. But this chart shows that gasoline prices have been falling lately, which hints that inflation might be past its peak and that prices generally may be heading lower. Strategies and daily, short and engaging stories that you will get from Finimize are from in-house experts and world-class analysts who previously worked for Goldman Sachs, HSBC, Barclays. Click the link in my description box to get a 7-day free trial of Finimize, plus 40% off. Become a smarter investor in minutes. The main job of the Federal Reserve is to protect the value of the dollar, to keep people's faith in the dollar, to make sure that your dollars tomorrow won't become worthless. So when inflation is almost hitting double digits, it is clear that the Fed is failing its most important job. But it isn't always the fault of the Fed. The federal government is to blame as well, since the president literally appoints the chairman of the Fed, who is the most important decision maker in the Fed. Secondly, sometimes the government overspends, like distributing stimulus checks or forgiving student loans. There is nothing called as free money. If you have borrowed money, you have to return it, plus interest. That's how capitalism works. The moment you misuse that printing press and keep printing to pay for everything, the value of your currency will quickly plummet. Imagine hypothetically there are 10 goods and $10 in the entire economy. In this hypothetical example, each good will cost a single dollar. If we throw an additional $10 into the economy, now there will be $20, but still 10 goods in the economy, which will make the cost of each good to double to match the demand and supply. Of course, it's just a theoretical example, but you get the point. When you throw trillions of dollars into the economy, that's what you get whether you like it or not. And instead of trying to solve the problem by limiting the supply of money, the Fed is saying that inflation is caused by shortage of energy and supply chain problems. Yes, of course, these are the factors that are contributing to inflation, but that doesn't still exclude the fact that there are too many dollars in the economy. Back in the 1970s, when inflation hit 11%, guess what Arthur Burns said, who was the chairman of the Fed back then? He blamed the shortage of energy and food. Later though, he raised the rates overnight to more than 12% by the mid-1974. That instantly cut inflation by half, which was good news. But naturally, that created a recession, since suddenly there was significantly less money flowing into the economy, which increased the unemployment rate to about 9% from 5%. Instead of keeping the rates high enough for super long, Burns panicked and lowered the rates, which brought inflation back. Inflation remained high until Paul Volcker was appointed as the chairman of the Fed in 1979. He raised the rates up until 19% and kept them high for a few years. He was unpopular, people hated him, but he left the office with inflation at around 3%. And it seems as if the exact scenario is repeating now. Instead of raising the rates last year, the Fed denied any signs of inflation. Now it's not raising the rates high enough and blaming global energy prices. The economy is getting into a recession, and they're changing the definition of the recession. Come on guys, raising the rates will be painful, but you know what's more painful? Seeing the value of your savings vanish. According to Ray Dalio, that's what happens when empires reach their peak. The entire empire runs on debt. However, someone's debt is someone else's financial asset, literally a passive income asset. When the United States debt rises, someone else on the other side of the world holding that debt becomes wealthier. Over time, as that debt keeps growing, sustaining it becomes even more difficult. It's like when you get into debt. When you get a mortgage, you only have to make a $1,500 payment, for example, every month. Not a burden. But when you get a car loan, a credit card loan, a travel loan, a loan to renovate your house, but your income doesn't rise at that speed, so at some point you either have to cut your spending or go bankrupt. The problem is that when the source of the wealth is printing money, nobody even pays much attention to where the wealth is coming from. Everyone got their paycheck, but nobody's money was taken away, so it's politically easier. So you hear of the discussions, we need to spend money on this, we need to spend money on that, but there is not much talk about where does the money come from? Everyone was concerned about the stimulus checks, but no one was worried asking where the money is going to come from. And now the United States is indirectly leading a war against Russia by defending Ukraine. Where is the money coming from? Student loan forgiveness? Where does the money come from? The list goes on. And then we wonder why we have so much inflation. You cannot deceive the basic laws of demand and supply. I know that raising the rates will tumble the profits, but high inflation will squeeze consumer buying power as well. So the consumers are losing either way. The only difference is that savers will not suffer in the long run, which is how things are supposed to be in the first place. Sooner or later, the Fed will have to acknowledge that, and it will raise the rates so high and long enough that it will cause some kind of a stagflation that will drag on for a few years at least. We have already talked about how to protect yourself during high inflation, but here are a few suggestions from Ray Dalio. Build as diverse portfolio as possible, ranging from inflation index bonds, which Dalio recommends above regular bonds, to physical assets like gold. Figure out how many weeks you could financially survive if you lost your job. It always pays to find out whatever the worst case scenario is and cover yourself from that. When stagflation hits, you cannot do much, so it's always better to prepare earlier. That's it for today, thanks for watching and see you in the next one.